Christina's family had a concern about the marriage. Jack had a friend named Ronald Barry, who was a 28-year-old immigrant from Italy who was a professional ballroom dancer. It was reported that Jack, Christina, and Ronald spent an inordinate amount of time together. Christina's family even thought that Ronald was in love with Christina. Following the elopement, the newlywed Ketterwells spent the next few days at a rented apartment in Toronto. Bizarrely, Ronald joined them for the entirety of their honeymoon, and on May 17th, the trio headed to Ronald's remote cottage in Severn Falls that was only accessible by boat. During that time, it was reported that Christina began to act out of character. She would go into crying fits and at other times seemed dazed. Evidence suggests that Christina had conversations with Ronald about whether or not Jack truly loved her. On May 20th, Christina disappeared, and Ronald's cabin mysteriously caught on fire. Ronald returned to the cabin to find a disoriented Jack sitting in the cabin with an apparent head injury and pulled him out of the flames. It was then reported he looked for Christina but couldn't find her anywhere in the cottage. Ronald then said that the cottage burned down in just an hour. He then took Jack into the boat back to the mainland of Severn Falls, took his friend to the hospital, and then contacted the police. It was then that the situation became worse. Later, Christina's body was found by an owner of a boathouse in the area. Her body was free from burns or any signs of violence. An autopsy found traces of codeine in her stomach, but her ultimate cause of death was declared a drowning. Interestingly enough, Major Lawrence Scarterfield, who acted as a first responder to the fire, reported that he saw no signs of Christina's body in the area when he went to go get water to help extinguish the flames from the house just hours earlier. Jack, Ronald, and 20 other people were questioned by police, and despite possible theories, including that Christina committed suicide, this case remains unsolved. Number 23. The creepy murder in room 1046. On January 22nd, 1935, a man calling himself Roland T. Owen checked into the Hotel President in Kansas City, Missouri. He showed up dressed in a black coat and received the room key for room 1046. When the maid, Mary Soptic, said Owen allowed her to clean while he was in the room, but asked not to lock the door behind her because his friend was about to visit the room very soon. Soptic said he kept the blinds tightly drawn and the lights off, with the exception of one dim lamp. Soptic said he kept the blinds tightly drawn and the lights off, with the exception of one dim lamp. Other staff members who entered the room mentioned that same detail. Soptic also mentioned that Owen was either worried about something or afraid, and he always wanted to kind of keep in the dark. At 4 p.m., Soptic returned with fresh towels to find Owen laying on the bed, completely dressed in the dark, with the door unlocked. She also saw a note that read, "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." The next day, on January 3rd, Soptic came back to clean the room that morning. She noticed that the door had been locked from the outside and assumed Owen had locked it while he was leaving the room. However, Owen was sitting inside, again with the lights off, which meant that someone else had locked the door from outside the room. When Soptic was cleaning, Owen answered a telephone call and said, "No, Dawn, I don't want to eat. I am not hungry. I just had breakfast," repeating, "No, I am not hungry." Soptic again arrived later that evening to bring fresh towels and heard 2 male voices coming from inside the room. When she knocked on the door, she heard a rough voice say, "Who is it?" When she explained that she had fresh towels, the voice replied, "We don't need any." During the night, a woman staying in room 1048 would report hearing loud voices, both male and female, cursing on the same floor. Though there was a party going on that night in room 1055. The next morning, January 4th, around 7 a.m., the hotel switchboard operator noticed that Owen's phone was off the hook for quite some time without being in use, so she sent the bellboy, Randolph Probst, to go see what was up. Despite the door having a "Do Not Disturb" sign, Probst knocked several times and heard a voice that said, "Come in, turn on the lights." However, the door was locked and no one was getting up to let the bellboy in. So, after knocking repeatedly, Probst simply said, "Put the phone back on the hook," assuming that Owen was drunk. About an hour and a half later, at around 8:30 a.m., the phone was still off the hook, and another bellboy, Harold Pike, let himself into the room with a passkey. Using only the light from the hall, Pike discovered Owen lying on the bed naked and assumedly drunk. He also noticed that the bedding was darkened around Owen. The phone stand was kicked down to the ground, so he fixed it and put the phone back into the receiver. From 10:30 to 10:45 a.m., the phone was once again off the receiver. They sent Probst to resolve the situation, and when he opened the door, he saw a truly horrific scene. Probst told the police, "When I entered the room, this man was within 2 feet of the door, on his knees and elbows, holding his head in his hands. I saw blood on his head. I then turned the light on. I looked around and saw blood on the walls, on the bed, and in the bathroom. This frightened me, and I immediately left the room and went downstairs." Owen had been bound with a cord around his neck, wrists, and ankles. His neck had bruising, suggesting someone had been attempting to strangle him. He had been stabbed more than once in the chest, above the heart, and one of the wounds had punctured his lung. Blows to his head had left him with a skull fracture on the right side. In addition to the blood Probst had seen, there was some additional spatter on the ceiling. Dr. Flanders cut the cords from Owen's wrist and asked him who had done this to him. "Nobody," he answered. Asked then what had caused these injuries, Owen said he had fallen and hit his head on the bathtub. The doctor asked if he had been trying to kill himself. After saying no, Owen lost consciousness and was taken to the hospital. He was completely comatose by the time he arrived and died shortly after midnight on January 5th. Although Owen's true identity was revealed a year and a half later as Artemis Ogletree, no suspects have ever been identified. The Kansas City Police continue to investigate. Number 24. The Shark Arm Murders. In early 1935, Googie Aquarium and swimming baths in Sydney, Australia were floundering. The world was in the middle of the Great Depression, and the aquarium's owner, original operator to 45-year-old Jimmy Smith. He had been missing since April 7th, 1935. Early investigations led police to a Sydney businessman named Reginald William Lloyd Holmes. Holmes was a smuggler who also ran a successful family boat building business at Lavender Bay, New South Wales. Holmes had employed Smith several times to work insurance scams, including one in 1934, in which an overinsured pleasure cruiser named Pathfinder was sunk. Shortly afterward, the pair began a partnership with Patrick Francis Brady, an ex-serviceman and convicted forger. With signatures from Holmes's friends and clients provided by the boat tycoon, Brady would forge checks for small amounts against their bank accounts, which he and Smith then cashed. Police were later able to figure out that Smith had been blackmailing Holmes. Smith was last seen drinking and playing cards with Patrick Francis Brady at the Cecil Hotel in southern Sydney after telling his wife he was going fishing. Brady had rented a small cottage at the time Smith went missing. Police alleged that Smith was murdered at this cottage. Port Hacking and Gunnamatta Bay were searched by the Australian Navy and the Air Force, but the rest of Smith's body was never found. Number 25. The Lost Colony of Roanoke. In 1587, English colonial governor John White led a group of people from Britain to found an English colony settling on Roanoke Island, one of a chain of barrier islands which is now known as the Outer Banks near North Carolina. When rations were running low, White left for more supplies. When he returned 3 years later, he found the colony carefully abandoned, with all houses and military constructions dismantled with care. Before he had left the colony, White had instructed his people that if they were taken by force, someone was to carve a cross into a nearby tree. But there was no cross nor sign they had been brutally taken over. The only clue was the word Croatoan, the name of a Native American tribe that allied with the English colonists, which was carved into a post. White took this to mean that the colonists had moved to a Croatoan island. Ongoing investigations have claimed that the colonists had been slaughtered by the Powhatan tribe, but there is no archaeological evidence to support this, and a recent re-examination indicates that any massacre that occurred was not of this particular group of colonists, but rather a group of colonists who had arrived earlier. More theories involve an amalgamation between the Dorothy Harriet Camille Arnold was a wealthy New York socialite. She was the daughter of perfume importer Francis Rose Arnold and his wife Mary Martha Parks Arnold. As far as anyone knew, she had a happy home life. On the morning of December 12th, 1910, she left her home on the Upper East Side of Manhattan and told her mother that she was headed downtown to buy an evening dress. According to the New York Times, when her mother asked if she could accompany her daughter, Dorothy said, "No. When I find the gown I want, I will telephone you and you can come down and see it." When she left the house, she had over $30 in her pocket. In today's currency, that would be more than $750. On her way down Fifth Avenue, she stopped at a grocery store on 59th Street to buy some chocolate. Then at a bookstore on 27th Street, where she bought a copy of Engaged Girl Sketches, the slightly humorous collection of short romantic stories. Around the time when she bought the book, she ran into a friend from college, Gladys King. The two talked about a party that they had both been invited to, the same party that Dorothy was buying a dress for. Gladys left to meet her mother for lunch, and Dorothy was never seen again. Francis Arnold was reluctant to gain publicity over his daughter's disappearance and initially employed the help of private investigators. After those attempts were unsuccessful, the family filed a missing person report with the New York City Police Department in January 1911. Various theories, sightings, and rumors regarding Arnold's disappearance circulated in the years and decades after she was last seen, but the circumstances surrounding her disappearance have never been resolved, and her fate remains unknown. Number 27. The Murder of Bugsy Siegel. Bugsy turned his sights to Las Vegas since Nevada had legalized gambling, and they would avoid any headaches trying to dodge police. With syndicate money in 1945, Bugsy took over a struggling construction project outside the city limits, the Flamingo Hotel and Casino. At that time, Las Vegas was nothing like the glittering city we think of today. The Flamingo was the first luxury hotel on the Strip. Even though the project wasn't finished, Bugsy opened the casino on December 26, 1946. Famous celebrities like Judy Garland and Clark Gable attended the opening. After the party was over, Bugsy closed the doors to finish construction, and the mob back on the East Coast became antsy. By this time, the casino's budget had ballooned from $1 million up to $6 million, thanks to Bugsy skimming from the top. During a meeting of the mob bigwigs in Cuba, it was settled that if the Flamingo was a success, Bugsy would be able to make things right. Luckily for Bugsy, the Flamingo had already made $250,000 in profit. Unluckily for Bugsy, it wasn't enough to please the mob. On June 20th, 1947, Bugsy was sitting on the couch at his mistress Virginia Hill's home in Beverly Hills, California. At around 10:45 p.m., from a rose-covered pergola just 14 feet away from Bugsy, a .30 caliber military rifle fired at least 9 shots at the mobster. 4 rounds hit Bugsy, killing him instantly. Moments later, 3 of Meyer Lansky's henchmen walked into the Flamingo and declared that they were taking over the casino. Beverly Hills Police Chief Clinton H. Anderson said the following statement: "We spent many man-hours investigating the Siegel case and were convinced that he was killed by his own associates. But there was never sufficient evidence to pinpoint the identity of the assassin." Number 28. The Jameson family disappearance. On October 8th, 2009, the Jameson family, 44-year-old Bobby Dale, 40-year-old Sherilyn Leanne, and their 6-year-old daughter, Madison Stormy Starr, were seen for the last time before vanishing without a trace. The family, who lived in Eufaula, Oklahoma, was last seen by a man who lived in the mountains in southeastern Oklahoma. cash in a bank bag, and the Jamesons' pet dog, Maisie, who was incredibly malnourished but still alive. Bobby's cell phone had a picture of Madison, and it is believed to have been taken the day before they disappeared. The truck showed no evidence of any kind of struggle. Former Sheriff Beauchamp remarked, "I think they were forced to stop and got out of the truck to meet with someone they recognized, and I think they either left willingly or by force." The GPS unit in the truck indicated that the family had been farther up a nearby hill prior to the location where the truck and belongings were found. Investigators followed the coordinates and found footprints. One day later, on October 17th, 300 people, including authorities and volunteers, staged a large-scale air and ground search party, but unfortunately, any leads went cold, and the search for the Jamesons was called off. On November 16th, 2013, hunters were scouting for deer hunting locations when they found partial skeletal remains of 3 bodies, 2 adults and 1 child. The remains were found less than 3 miles from where the Jameson family had parked their truck 4 years earlier. The search uncovered shoes, bits of clothing, adult teeth, an adult arm and leg bone, and bone fragments. The bones would eventually be confirmed as the missing Jameson family. However, no cause of death was determined, and the circumstances surrounding their disappearance remain unknown. Number 29. The OJ Simpson case. On June 13th, 1994, the bodies of the ex-wife of football superstar OJ Simpson, Nicole Brown Simpson, and Ronald L. Goldman were found outside Nicole's townhouse, stabbed to death. At the time, Nicole and OJ were divorced and living in separate residences. The bodies were found by neighbors who were literally led to the bodies by Nicole's dog, who was reported to be incessantly barking around the time of the murders. The timeline surrounding the murders is as follows. On June 12th at 6:30 p.m., Nicole, her children, and others arrive at the restaurant called Mezzaluna. At 9:15 p.m. that same night, her sister house neighbor hears a dog bark and cry while he is watching TV. Prosecutors then theorize that these barks signalized the murder of the dog's owner, Nicole. At 10:25, a limo driver named Alan Park arrives at OJ Simpson's home. OJ was scheduled for a red-eye flight at 11:45. At 10:40, Cato reported he heard 3 loud thumps on an outside wall of the guest house he was staying in. From 10:40 to 10:55, Alan Park buzzed OJ's intercom several times, but there was no answer. Just before 11, Alan reports seeing a shadowy figure that is 6 feet tall and over 200 pounds walking across the driveway. At 11, Alan tried buzzing OJ again, and this time OJ answered. He claimed that he had overslept and just got out of the shower. At 11:45, OJ departs on his flight, and at 12:10 a.m. the next morning, the bodies of Nicole and Ronald Goldman are discovered. Evidence found at the crime scene included a blood-stained glove, a knitted hat, and a bloodied footprint. When OJ landed in Chicago, he was contacted by Detective Ron Phillips and told that his ex-wife had died. Upon hearing the news, OJ asked who killed her. OJ was then questioned for 3 hours by the LAPD. Then, on June 17th, OJ was charged with 2 counts of murder and was declared a fugitive. The high-speed chase involving police and OJ's white Ford Bronco has been a lasting memory for anyone involved with the case. During the chase, OJ was sitting in the passenger seat and the car was being driven by his friend Al Cowlings. Cowlings reported that he didn't stop because OJ was holding a gun to his head and that OJ was suicidal. The chase would end at OJ's home in Brentwood. Inside the car, they found makeup adhesive, a fake mustache, OJ's passport, and a gun. What followed was one of the most publicized trials in U.S. history. OJ was represented by a high-profile defense team, also known as the Dream Team, which was initially led by Robert Shapiro and then by Johnny Cochran. The team also included F. Lee Bailey, Alan Dershowitz, Robert Kardashian, Sean Hawley, Carl E. Douglas, and Gerald Ullman. Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld were 2 additional attorneys who specialized in DNA evidence. Prosecutors were Deputy District Attorneys Marcia Clark, William Hodgman, and later Christopher Darden. They thought that they had a strong case against Simpson, but Cochran was able allegedly been mishandled by lab scientists and technicians. The defense team also cited other misconduct by the LAPD related to systemic racism and incompetence. The verdict was released on October 3rd, 1995, and OJ Simpson was acquitted. To this day, no other suspects have been questioned, and the murders remain unsolved. Number 30. The Mystery of Overtoun Bridge. In Scotland, there lies a bridge called the Overtoun Bridge that seems to call dogs to jump to their death. Since the early 1960s, over 50 canines have perished, and hundreds more have leapt but survived, with some returning for a second leap onto the jagged rocks that lie 50 feet below. The Scottish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals has sent representatives to investigate, but with no luck. In terms of scientific truth, it is debatable that dogs are capable of forming a suicide attempt. Yet, something is luring dogs off the Overtoun Bridge, often from the same spot and always on sunny, dry days. Many theories have conspired, including that the bridge is haunted, a small animal is marking the area with an irresistible scent, or a sound exists